The soft glow of chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the grand ballroom. Alexander Morrison adjusted his navy blue bow tie for the third time in 10 minutes, his hands betraying the calm expression he wore. Around him, the city's elite mingled with champagne glasses and practiced smiles, their laughter echoing through the opulent space. Alexander had built his tech empire from nothing. At 32, he commanded boardrooms with the same ease most people ordered.
Coffee.
But tonight, surrounded by the familiar faces of high society, he felt like that awkward college student again, the one who had loved and lost the most important person in his world. Across the room, Victoria Pemberton glided between guests like she owned the place, which, in many ways, she did. Her family's wealth traced back generations, and she had never let Alexander forget it during their 3-year relationship. Even now, 2 years after their bitter breakup, she held court with the same effortless grace that had first captivated him. "She looks happy," came a gentle voice beside him. Alexander turned to find Emma Chen, his personal assistant turned unlikely companion for the evening. She wore a stunning midnight blue gown that complemented her warm brown eyes. Her long hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, and for a moment, Alexander forgot why he had asked her to accompany him tonight. "That's the point," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She needs to see that I've moved on too." 3 months ago, Alexander had received an invitation to tonight's charity gala. Victoria would be there. She was always there. The thought of facing her alone, of enduring her pitying looks and subtle condescension, had filled him with dread. In a moment of desperation, he had turned to Emma with an unusual request. "I need a favor," he had said that day in his corner office. "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend." Emma had looked up from her tablet, her expression unreadable. She had worked for Alexander for 2 years, handling everything from his schedule to his coffee preferences with quiet efficiency. She knew about Victoria, about the breakup that had left him throwing himself into work with renewed intensity. "For how long?" she had asked simply. "Just one night. The Morrison Foundation Gala. Victoria will be there, and I can't face her questions about why I'm still alone." Now, standing in the ballroom with Emma's hand resting lightly on his arm, Alexander wondered if this had been a mistake. Emma moved with natural grace, her smile genuine as she spoke with the other guests. She asked thoughtful questions, laughed at the right moments, and somehow made him feel more relaxed than he had in months. "Tell me about your company," said Mrs. Henderson, a silver-haired philanthropist who had cornered them near the silent auction display. "I understand you've revolutionized data security?" Alexander launched into his practiced explanation, but he found himself watching Emma's face as he spoke. She nodded encouragingly, her eyes bright with interest, even though she had heard this speech dozens of times before. When he stumbled over a technical term, she seamlessly stepped in with a clarification, her knowledge surprising even him. You. "Two make such a lovely couple," Mrs. Henderson observed, with a knowing smile. "How long have you been together?" 6 months, Emma answered without hesitation, her fingers finding Alexander's and intertwining naturally. "Though it feels like we've known each other much longer." The warmth of her touch sent an unexpected jolt through Alexander's chest. This was supposed to be an act, a carefully orchestrated performance to save his pride. But the way Emma looked at him in that moment, with genuine affection shining in her eyes, made his breath catch. As the evening progressed, Alexander found himself forgetting about Victoria entirely. He was captivated by the way Emma threw her head back when she laughed, by the passionate way she spoke about the literacy program they were supporting tonight, by the gentle way she touched his arm when she wanted his attention. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, when the orchestra began playing a slow waltz. Emma nodded, and he led her onto the dance floor. Other couples swayed around them, but Alexander only had eyes for the woman in his arms. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked just beneath his chin. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For doing this. I know it wasn't part of your job description." Emma pulled back slightly to meet his gaze. "Alexander," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." Before she could continue, a familiar voice cut through the music. "Alexander Morrison, I should have known you'd be here." Victoria appeared beside them, resplendent in emerald silk, her smile sharp as a blade. Her eyes swept over Emma with practiced dismissal, before settling on Alexander with the same mixture of affection and superiority he remembered so well. "Victoria," Alexander said evenly, his arm tightening protectively around Emma's waist. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Victoria's tone suggested that friendship was the most she was willing to consider. "This is Emma Chen," Alexander said, pride coloring his voice. "My girlfriend." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "How lovely. And what do you do, Emma?" "I'm a writer," Emma replied calmly. "I also handle communications for Morrison Tech." It wasn't entirely a lie. Emma had a master's degree in journalism and had written several articles for the company newsletter. But Alexander heard the slight catch in her voice and realized she was nervous. "How industrious," Victoria said with a thin smile. "Well, I do hope you're keeping Alexander out of trouble. He has such a tendency to lose himself in his work." "Actually," Emma said, her voice growing stronger, "I think his dedication is one of his most admirable qualities. Not everyone has the courage to build something meaningful from nothing." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Before she could respond, her current boyfriend, a hedge fund manager with perfectly styled hair and vacant eyes, appeared to claim her for the next dance. As they walked away, Alexander turned to Emma with amazement. "That was incredible. The way you stood up to her. No one's ever done that before." Emma's cheeks flushed pink. "She had no right to speak to you that way. You're brilliant and kind and—" She trailed off, looking down at her hands. "And what?" Alexander prompted. Gently. "And I've been in love with you for over a year," she whispered. The words hung between them like a bridge Alexander had never expected to find. He thought of all the late nights they had worked together, all the small moments of connection he had dismissed as mere friendship. Emma had been there through his worst days, celebrating his victories and supporting him through his failures, asking for nothing in return. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I asked you here tonight because I thought I needed to prove something to Victoria. But being here with you, seeing you shine like this, I realize I don't care what she thinks anymore." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I've been such a fool. You've been right in front of me this whole time." As the orchestra played and the city glittered beyond the tall windows, Alexander leaned down and kissed Emma softly. It was nothing like the passionate, tumultuous relationship he had shared with Victoria. This was steady and warm and real, like coming home after a long journey. When they broke apart, Emma smiled up at him with tears in her eyes. "So what happens now?" Alexander smiled back, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Now we stop pretending," he said, "and start living. Around them," the gala continued. But Alexander and Emma only had eyes for each other, finally free to love without pretense or fear.